afternoon, all. I hope all of you are doing well. Uh, in this afternoon session, we have with us Dr. DC Joshi. He is the scientist plant breeding ICAR Vivekananda Institute of Hill Agriculture, Almora, Uttarakhand. Sir is going to deliberate on the topic of millets and cereal production scenario in northwest Himalayas, challenges and opportunities. Sir, you have the control now. You are visible and your slide is visible and you are also audible. Please go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, participants. First of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my experiences on millets and pseudo-cereal production scenario in Northwest Himalayas, the different challenges and opportunities. I'm very thankful to Director ICR, Indian Grassland Fodder Research Institute, for providing me this opportunity, and also the officer in charge of Regional Research Station Srinagar and the National Agriculture Development Corporation Limited, Baramulla, for giving me the opportunity. I have a long association with that ICR, Indian Grassland Fodder Research Institute, because as a ARS scientist, I first joined that institute and served there for 7 to 8 years. Then I shifted to my native place, Almora, because of some family issues. And I'm quite familiar with this, the topic and the fodder production, the different challenges, opportunities, and we'll try to incorporate some of our experience of millet and pseudo cereals in that aspect as well. So as I said, my talk will be mainly on the Northwest Himalayan region, but whatever I am speaking is equally applicable for the northeastern region of the country as well. So if any participant from that region thinks whatever I am speaking, that equally be applicable to that region as well. So my talk will focus mainly on the general overview of millets and pseudo cereals in Northwest Himalayas. And what are the production and productive trends, and what are the reasons behind their increments and downfall? What are the major production constraints for them? And what are the different research intervention items going on at national level and international level? And finally, what are the studies for the intensive millet and pseudo-cereal production in Northwest Himalayan region? So let's get started. If we see the Northwest Himalaya, it comprises of mainly two states, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, and the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. It's a treasure of biodiversity in terms of flora and fauna, but has very limited infrastructure and economic development. And the most of the region is rain-fed. But if we talk in case of Uttarakhand, out of the 8,000 million hectare area, nearly 70% is rain-fed, only drought hit. Then the ecosystem is very fragile because we lies in one of the youngest range of Himalaya in terms of evolution, where still many geo activities are going on. For example, the movement tectonic plates is still going on because this region is still evolving. So that often results sometimes in earthquakes, floods, and the climate change is also severe. Now, who can forget the floods of 2013, which has almost destroyed Uttarakhand and the Kedarnath flood of that region? Further, the farmers are marginals, their small landholdings, and the economic status is very poor. Their status is socio-economic status further constrained because of the difficult terrains and inaccessibility of the resources. So whatever locally available, they are dependent on that only. This tug of war between the availability resources and ecosystem balance has shifted the state of equilibrium to the overexploitation of the resources, which ultimately leads to a continuous exodus of people to metro cities. This is very particular and very common in Uttarakhand because now in Uttarakhand, especially in Almora district and Pauri district, the villages are called ghost villages. Nobody lives there. So because of these difficulties, people are not living there. So now my talk is on the millets and pseudo-cereal production and how these millet and pseudo-cereal crops can contribute to reduce this migration and can answer these are the points and these challenges. So if we talk about the millets in Northwest Himalaya, looking into the different terrain and the hostile weather pattern, the ancestors of that region had chosen the crops and the farming system which can sustain that region. For example, there was a mixed farming, and the system is called Baranaja. It's a Hindi word. It means the mixed cropping of 12 grains and pulses. So they choose it very scientifically because it was a mixed farming of 12 grains and cereals. They have different crops, like in terms of in cereals, millets are the major part. Then they have pulses like pulses, the horse gram, a hardy and dot tolerant pulse. Then black soybean, locally it is called bhat. It is also part of that. Then pseudo cereals like grain amaranth, it is there, and some vegetables like cucurbits. And each component crop has its own role in that particular system. Actually, Baranaja is nothing but it's a crop insurance scheme, because if something happens, suppose famine comes, drought comes, at least something will grow in place of nothing. And each crop has its own role. For example, the cereals in the millets, they are used for consumption of coarse cereals, for grain, for food. Then vegetables are there. Then pulses for protein, and the pseudo cereal like amaranth for nutrients, micronutrients, and quality protein. And the cucurbits, which are used part of this system, because sometimes the rains are very heavy in that region. So they used to check the reduce the rate of the rainfall in that region, so that the soil erosion will be reduced. That's in the same way the millets have very tapped root system, very deep root system. So in case of even drought, it can go deep down the soil water layer and can access the water and can survive. And at least they can survive that. That's why they call famine crops. And then ecosystem resilience, because this system is very fragile, it's still evolving, and these crops are very adapted to that particular region. Further, they are the integral part of local food system and folks and festival as well. For example, I will share just one example. The foxtail millet. It is used as traditional medicine in this region for treating the chicken pox of kids. So when I was a kid, my mother used to feed me the foxtail millet food, and the kids used to recover from that chicken pox. Similarly, I will share one more story. It's a part of it's kind of heritage grain for that region. In the adjoining villages of Nepal and Uttarakhand, there is a special kind of finger millet. The people used to call it, the tribal used to call it the son-in-law finger millet. Then I asked why you call them son-in-law finger millet. They said because the taste of this finger millet is quite different and better than the normal finger millet. So whenever their daughter and son-in-law used to visit them, so they used to greet their son and daughter-in-law with that finger millet as well, the dish of that finger millet. That's why they name it the son-in-law finger millet. So that's why this is the part of heritage and folks of that region as well. So there are two types of millets. Actually, millet is a Greek word. It means a handful of grains in a small panicle. There are two types of millets, the greater millets and smaller millets. The greater millets are sorghum and pearl millet. They are particularly more adapted to the semi-arid condition of hot and dry regions. The small millets are well adapted to the temperate environment of northwest Himalaya, like finger millet is one important one, then banana millet, little millet, kodo millet, troso millet, and foxtail millet. But now the scenario is totally different, and out of these 6 millets, you can only see finger millet and banana and to some extent foxtail millet as well. Then coming to another group of important crop, the pseudocereal northwest Himalaya. Similarly, as I said, millets, they are ecosystem, they have also ecosystem resilience, and there are 3 types of pseudocereals: amaranth, buckwheat, and the other one, the quinoa, chinopod. But the northwest Himalayan region, the main important are amaranth and the buckwheat. Amaranth, the name itself says, amaranth means immortal grains. It means if somebody eats it, he will be immortal. It's a native of South America and introduced to India approximately 400 years ago. It has a long cultivation history, and it is also an ancient grain of the world. And 8,000 years ago, it has a cultivation history of 8,000 years. And there are 3 main species: the Amaranth hypochondriacus, Amaranth caudatus, and Amaranth cruentus. These all have originated in the tropical lowland and highlands of South America and introduced to India. And in India, the main species is Amaranth hypochondriacus. Whatever the lenticels and varieties we have, they are from the hypochondriacus type. Similarly, another one is buckwheat. The 3 species are the Phagoparene esculentum, that is called common buckwheat, the Phagoparene tataricum, that is Tartary buckwheat, and the Phagoparene cymosum. It is still a wild species. This buckwheat is particularly adapted to the northwestern Himalayan region and particularly higher hills. It has its origin in higher hills of Tibet and China, and it's performed very well in Himalayan region, and also called the future crop of this particular region. Phagoparene esculentum and tataricum have very different kind of breeding behavior. Esculentum is totally cross-pollinated, and tataricum is highly self-pollinated crop. And cymosum is still a semi-domesticated type of species, and it is traditionally used as a medicine and fodder in China. Now coming to the trends of area production productivity. If you see that the problem with these crops are that you can't find, it's very difficult to find authentic data. And we got find only for 3 decades from 86 to 2016. And if you see the production, the area, it's continually declining from the base year of 1986. That is very alarming and discouraging. And if you see the out of the 3 states, only Uttarakhand has a sizable area, right? And this Uttarakhand has at least 10% of total cultivated area of the country. And in case of J&K, the figures are available only for last 5 years. So that is the status. Similarly, the production is also decreasing from the base year. But at the time, the productivity has increased because in the last decade, particularly, there a lot of emphasis has been given on by policymakers and research intervention is going. That may be a reason. That's why the production, the productivity has increased. Now, if you see in case of cereals, we don't have reliable data for amaranth from any source. If you see the global trend of buckwheat, that is from FAO website, it is also alarming. If you see that from last 5 decades, the buckwheat production compared to major cereal, it's very low and the area is also decreasing. It shows that there is no concentrated crop improvement efforts and the crop management practice and no policy support as well. Now coming to the malnutrition northwest Himalaya. If you see that this is the data from the National Family Health Survey of India. If you see the rural mass and urban mass, the children's below 5 years, the standard growth, it's quite high in both urban and rural mass. Similarly, it is very the percentage of anemic women, pregnant women in both rural and urban mass in North Himalaya is quite high. This is because the diet is not sufficient. Whatever we are eating, that's on based on major carbohydrate crops like major cereal crops like maize, wheat, and rice. So that leads to a hidden hunger. So this is the one reason we should promote the diversification with the pseudo cereals and millets in that region, so that a balanced diet could be given to the people of that region. Now, coming to the millet, the exceptional unparalleled nutrition quality of these grains. Before I speak about their unparalleled nutritive value, I just want to highlight the tweet of our Prime Minister. You can see in my slide. He tweeted on 30th of August 2019. And sorry, I have to speak. I have to read this in Hindi because he tweeted in Hindi. He said, आज हम देखते हैं कि जिस भोजन को हमने छोड़ दिया, उसको दुनिया ने अपनाना शुरू कर दिया. जौ, ज्वार, रागी, कोदो, सामा, बाजरा, सावा, ऐसे अनेक अनाज कभी हमारे खानपान का हिस्सा हुआ करते थे, लेकिन ये हमारी थालियों से गायब हो गए. अब इस पोषक आहार की पूरी दुनिया में डिमांड है. So this shows that policymakers are very concerned about these crops. Although they have a status of neglected and orphan crops, but slowly the way the climate is changing and the pandemics are coming like COVID-19, the people are also thinking about changing the food habits as well. So that leads to the National Year of Millets in 2018. Then the government of India had sent a proposal to FAO and it has declared that 2013 as International Year of Millets now, looking into their importance. If you see the two graphs on the slide, it's just comparison of two millets, the finger millet and barnyard millet, with the major 3 cereals, rice, wheat, and maize. It's a very high source of calcium. If you see the finger millet has 30% higher calcium than rice or wheat. Similarly, the source of iron, it is very high, so the rich source of iron and zinc. Similarly, the protein is gluten-free. People, those who have celiac diseases, they can easily eat this protein. Further, it has very resistant starch, means the glycemic index is very low. So it is a superfood for diabetic people. And further, if you see the store quality of these millets as well, it is at par with the sorghum, very common in semi region of the country. It is very, at least in some aspect, it's good than the fodder is good better than the sorghum stover. Similarly, the pseudo cereals, they are also part of the nature's nutraceutical basket. For example, the grain amaranth. You see the profile, the protein quality is very high because this protein is gluten-free. Also, it has a very high percentage of lysine, that is essential amino acid, which is very low percent in low amount of in rice, wheat, and maize, the major cereals. Further, it has very it is only the plant-based source of squalene. Otherwise, the squalene is extracted from fish. Squalene has different industrial application. Also, it is a very potent anti-carcinogenic agent. It is used for medicinal purposes. Its the mineral profile is very also high, and the protein quantity and quality is also high. Similarly, buckwheat. If you see the nutraceutical profile of this crop, the protein quality is similar to as amaranth has. The lysine is very high compared to other cereals. Similar protein quality high, and it is a rich source of flavonoid, dietary flavonoids. The main important rutin, camiferon, metaxin, and quercetin. The rutin is a main component which has different roles like anti-carcinogenic, anti-diabetic, plenty of role it plays, and it is a part of medicine as well. So this is one of the richest source of protein, plant-based source of protein, buckwheat. And if we see the foliage or the fodder of these both pseudocereals, that is quite heavily used in China, not in India, but buckwheat as a fodder is used in China. They have seen the product fodder quality. These essential nutrients are also present in that fodder as well, so they are quite good for animals as well. Now, as I said, very little has been done in terms of their research, in terms of both as a grain production and fodder production. So this is from our study. The barnyard millet is a one important crop which produces very voluminous fodder equal to sorghum and also grain as well. It's a dual type of crop in this region. And there are two species: the Indian barnyard millet, that's called Echinoclea fermentatia, and the Japanese species, Echinoclea sculenta. The Japanese species has particular adaptation in temperate northwestern Himalayan region. If you grow that in semi-arid region or hot region, it will terribly fail. It won't perform there. So we found that the protein quality, the fodder quality, and the yield is better compared to the Indian barnyard millet. So this is one aspect we have research, and we are promoting this as a both dual type crop in this region. Similarly, we have the adaptive of forestry types of finger millet. There are no study, very few studies. So there are different type of extraction we have has been chosen, and we found that Indian types are more suitable for both dual type, like for foliage as well, seed production as well, both dual type. And if you see the African type, they are more grain producing type than compared to the Indian type, because in Africa it is used as staple food, and India, the lenticels has been selected by farmers for both types. That's why the Indian one has high tillering, as well as also they produce a good amount of grain. So one strategy to improve the dual type finger millet in India is make the crosses between Indian gene pool and the African gene pool, because the crosses between African gene pool and Indian gene pool are very heterotic. The Indo-African Indo-African crosses can combine the grain production quality of production potential of finger millet and the fodder production potential of Indian type of genotype. So we can breed dual type of genotypes. Now, even after having such a great unbalanced nutrition profile and fodder production potential as well, very little has been done in terms of their research, and there are many constraints in their adaptation to modern agro ecosystem. There are many reasons. The first one is cumbersome breeding behavior. The breeding behavior, we see that they are very small floaters. They have highly self-motivated crops, and breeding biology is very cumbersome. So making crosses is very difficult, and because of that reason, the most of the cultivars right now in the country are simple pure line selection, and the recombination breeding is still a daunting challenge in millets and pseudocereals. Then the different sets of primary targets, like they have a high rate of seed scattering. In the unsynchronized maturity, the seed size is very small, which causes very difficult for mechanical planting and harvest. And then further, sometimes the grain color, if you see the millets, they are almost brown color or black color. So the products are also in a brown or blackish color. That is not consumer friendly. Then there is undeciphered genetic architecture of breeding targets. Nothing is known about the genetic control of different targets like maturity, yield. Nothing is known about them. It's still a lot of work has to be done. The genetic base is very low. For example, in barnyard millet, all Indian barnyard millet looks like same. There's very little variation. Then the phylogenetic in evolution is very complex. It is very difficult to make established evolutionary link between the different species, and still a lot of work is going on. A lot of work has to be done. I will save some expenses of our work as well. Then the most important in terms of commercial production, the cumbersome weed management. This is because it almost leads to 50% yield reduction in finger millet, and the weed management is very challenging because the initial vigor of millets is very poor. If you compare the vigor of maize and finger millet, you will be surprised. And because of that, the weeds dominate over these millets, and the crop growth reduce. Further, having a post-emergence of pre-emergence herbicide is very difficult because the most of the progenitors of millets are actually the weeds of rice or wheat, major cereals. For example, the barnyard millet, its progenitor Echinoclea tusgali, that is called jungle rice. It's a common weed of rice fields. So all the target herbicides which are available in the market, they target the crop as well. So it is difficult to have any herbicide. Further, northwestern Himalayan region, particularly in Uttarakhand, there is a lot of promotion for organic cultivation. So that is also a restriction using herbicides in this region as well. So the manual weeding has to be done, and manual weeding is very costly because labor cost very high nowadays, which ultimately reduces to very high seed production of these crops. Now, I will just describe that with what are the different breeding methods, advanced breeding method, we can answer some of these questions. Like genomic assisted breeding. So one of the most important requirement of this type of breeding, the modern breeding, is you should have a well-assembled reference genome. Fortunately, in some of the millets like finger millet, foxtail millet, and buckwheat, Tata buckwheat, and grain amaranth, we have genomes now. So the genome sequence is available. We need some collaborative work for starting the genome-wide exclusion studies to decipher the genetic control, important breeding target, the nutrition quality, and then after deducing the genetic control, apply for genomic selection or do the traditional breeding. Then molecular phylogeny. Now many things are available like chloroplast genomics and fish and dish, and the flavinol contents that is also recently done in buckwheat. I'll share the example for establishing the evolutionary link between the different species. Then hybrid breeding. It's not possible in all the millets and cereals, but in case of finger millet and grain amaranth, the male fertility is known, the source of GMS are known, though they are still in testing stage, not in the commercial stage. Further, the three different species of grain amaranth, they have very high heterotic potential. If you make that, they are easily crossable. So we make the gene pools based on that. Then mutation breeding. It can be used in crops like barnyard millet because the genetic base is very low. We are at Almora, we are using the electron beam radiation that is recently developed by BARC, and we are using that methodology for inducing the variation. Still, we haven't got anything which is quite efficient in terms of yield or other environment traits, but for leaf number and other types, we are getting some variation. Then split breeding. This is not an advanced kind of method where you can use a temperature, you can control the temperature and duration, day length, and generate 3 to 4 cycles generations in one season compared to only one generation in one season. That I'll see in next slides. Then next generation phenotyping. The phenotyping, there's large scale phenotyping and robust phenotyping for complex traits like root and other traits. It is also essential that I will share one example in my next slide. Then pre-breeding. It is nothing but utilizing an unreparated source of wild germplasm to the cultivate one and to have some genetic variation. And ultimately the matching population for deducing the genetic QTLs candidate genes for different breeding targets. So before we talk the genomic resources, we'll talk the genetic resources. If you see the different genetic resources of millets, at present more than 20,000 genetic resources are maintained in different gene banks. But if you see the evaluation, characterization, formulation for these resources, it is very scanty. So keeping that in view, some core and mini core collection have been developed in small millets, like finger millet, it is there with Acreset, foxtail millet, it is there, Tosa millet also it is there, and barnyard millet is also there. So the core collection is nothing but the representation of the large collection that can be phenotyped in replication in multi environments for having the reliable data for specific trait having high gene to interaction and identification of trait specific action for using in breeding program and also in utilizing molecular like genome-wide selections. Then if you see the genetic resource of pseudocereals, in case of buckwheat and grain amaranth, they are different gene banks across the world, they are maintaining the different resources and they're also a huge number, but still there is no core or mini core is available for them. And the phenotypic information for these resources is not there. So we need some collaborative efforts and international available to have the resources in the field, characterize them, and then identify the trait specific action for different traits. Then coming to genomic assisted breeding, this is one of our papers that appeared in Theoretical and Applied Genetics. Here we propose some aspects of genomic assisted breeding in grain amaranth, where genome sequence is available, and we can use the integrated data from phenotyping and genotyping. And actually, that we are doing in a project mode. And one of our German partners is also helping us. He's also co-author in this paper. Another one I will share from our own work, that is the buckwheat. It is also that we are doing for rutin, because rutin is one of the most important character in the buckwheat, which has high nutritional significance. So we are phenotyping that large scale, then genotyping it, and then identifying the genetic control of the rooting. And this is we are doing with our European partners and our Chinese partners. And if any one of you want this publication, I will be happy to share with you. You can have my mail ID and I will send this to you anytime. Then another one we have in that recently therapy and biotechnology advances, where we focus mainly on the strategic and genetic gain for nutraceutical development buckwheat. So how to use the genomics for nutraceutical development. There also we are using lutein and other characters and also enhancing the luteinization activity to reducing the luteinization activity in third seed buckwheat. Then another same in that finger millet, that is Apis planta. The same approach we are using, and here we are also using the core collection for photo quality, like different photo quality rates, photo rates, and then integrating the data with genomic data to identify the genetic control of these photo quality traits. Now, as I said, these species have a very complex species relationship and phylogenetic evolution. I will share one of our example. Amaranth coridatus. Actually, we collected this accession from a high altitude region of 2000, more than 2000 meters in northwest Himalaya. And morphologically, it is very similar to the species which is found in South American highland, Amaranth coridatus. So morphologically, if you see, all features looks like Amaranth coridatus. And we are confused and we thought, yes, it's coridatus. Then we consulted the USDA head, USDA Gene Bank head, Dr. David Brenner. He's a well-known Amaranth taxonomist item in the world. And he also said, after seeing the specimen, yes, it is Amaranth coridatus. But when we did some molecular analysis, we used the published reference genome of this Amaranth coridatus. And based on the 17 million SNP markers, we did a PC analysis. And interestingly, what we found that the Amaranth coridatus, which is morphologically similar to the Amaranth coridatus of South American highlands, actually grouping with Amaranth hypochondricus of India. Means at genomic level, it is showing similarity with hypochondricus, not with coridatus. Now, this discrepancy can be explained by the fact that during the course of introduction of this coridatus to India, there might have been some admixture or then crossing. So a particular genomic region might have been transferred from Amaranth hypochondricus to coridatus, which has given it a high yielding performance, that which because this is very prevalent species in India, and the adaptation to the highlands might have come from the genomic region of coridatus. So this is a very complex situation. At morphological, it's coridatus, but at molecular level, it's hypochondricus. Still, we are confirming and we're trying it. So based on, but this is information based on only one accession. So now what we are recently, we have submitted a big project into German collaboration in DBT, and we got some of, we have clear first round of clearance from that funding agency. And if you got that project, you will successful in that aspect. We are going to do in a large number of accessions, like 10,000, 20,000, so that we can at least reconstruct the introduction history of Amaranth to India and how it was evolved actually. Similar, one example from our work, this is recently appeared paper in Frontier Plant Science, where Phagopium esculentum, the common buckwheat, it is supposed that Cymosum is the progenitor of esculentum, right? But in our analysis, what we found, there is a species, subspecies, the Phagopium esculentum subspecies ancestral, which is a hybrid species between them, which works as a bridging species between them. And we confirm through flavonoid concentration, the plastic genome analysis, fish and dish, and also morphological level. We found that Phagopium esculentum is quite similar to the Phagopium esculentum subspecies in all the other aspects, which means it given us one clue that there is a hybrid species which is very close to the Phagopium esculentum. So this shows how complex the evolution is of these species. Coming to the speed breeding, that I said in last slide, this is developed by our German partner MGS Stater. It's nothing but reducing the crop cycle and modifying the temperature and growth condition and having more number of cycle generation in a year. So in this system, what they did, raising of plants in growth chambers, raising of plants in long day conditions, and night temperature and different light densities, that lead to plant display strong vegetative growth and flower after 10 weeks of planting. Similarly, transferring plant to short day condition and night temperature of 5 degrees Celsius, light intensity of 150, the plant display early reproductive growth and flower after 4 weeks of planting. The established protocol of Amaranth allows seed to seed generation of as little as 8 to 10 weeks. Generally in field, it took 4 to 5 months from seed to seed. So in a year, we can have at least 4 cycles. The speed breeding protocol leads to much smaller plants with less number of flowers, ideal for transforming and genome editing. Similarly, genomic selection in combination with speed breeding protocol in control condition could be used for advanced breeding breeding pools during a season for developing training population, and many other things. So this is one of the very good achievement in eminence breeding. Now coming to the next generation phenotyping, that I said phenotyping the quantitative traits, the highly complex traits like root, it's very difficult to quantify or to phenotype it. So this one we develop in sorghum, and that can equally be transferable to millets like finger millet and banana millet as well, because all of the millets has a common feature that they have a deep taproot system, a vertical type of root system, which go deep down in the soil layers and can extract water from there and can survive in that condition, extreme drought as well. And one character which has a real significance in determining the root architecture is root angle. If you determine at seedling stage, then it is highly correlated with the root architecture of adult plant. For example, if you have a nodal root, a narrow root angle at seedling stage, the plant will have a vertical type of root architecture. And if you have a vertical, if you have horizontal, if a broad root angle, then the plant will have horizontal kind of root architecture as a mature plants. So here we develop a pre-type platform. It's very simple and cost effective. Just use some root plexiglass seeds, and we identify the phenotypic stage of up to 5-leaf stage and planted them in that root boxes as well, fill them with soil. And we have 10 iron boxes, and at least in one box we can have 50 chambers. So by that we can have 500 genotypes at one run we can phenotype. And then we have an imaging box where you can put the root boxes in that imaging box, and the imaging box, both the side there's a camera that is connected with the tabs and Wi-Fi. So somebody can sit in glass house and just click and take the photographs and can phenotype through software what kind of angle it has. So same protocol can be utilized for our minor millets as well. So this is a publication. Somebody interested, you can take it from there, or you can just send me an email. I will forward copy to you. Now, I said the pre-breeding in one important activity which can enhance the genetic base. I said banana millet has a very narrow genetic base. So what we did, there are two types of species: Indian species, the Phagopyrum, the Echinoclea esculenta, that Indian type, and Echinoclea esculenta, the Japanese type. Japanese type is specific adaptation to Nolapus Himalayas. We wanted to make the crosses between esculenta and Fragmentasia, but the crosses are often sterile. So we use another study to make an intraspecific crosses between the Japanese species only. So what we can extract from that process, we have some genotype. If you see the panicle, it looks like sorghum, and their height is also reduced because in banana millet lodging is a big problem. If you have a semi-dwarf kind of habit with good panicle and good fodder type, that is the ideal dual type genotypes. So we are in the process of having these type of accessions, and we are in F5 or 6 stage right now. You can see the yield and fodder production of these genotypes compared to the national checks. Now, I said we have the mapping population. We need this population for identifying genetic control. For example, a blast is a major problem in hills in finger millet. Almost in all crop, blast is a major problem in hills, and finger millet is severe. So we develop a real population, and now we have phenotype for 3 years. The genotype is going on in the lab, and soon we will be able to get the genetic control of the blast resistance in finger millet. Now, I will just share some intervention what we are doing at ICAR-BPK Salmoda for their promotion and enhance research. The standardization hot water emasculation, because as I said, the problem with the hybridization in millets, very difficult. Then I said that almost all of them have a brown or black grain. The consumer is totally low. So we have developed some white grain type of genotype, this blast and genotype, dual type, both for fodder and grain as well. Then the cultivars for organic conditions, because this ecology is mainly for organic condition. The government also promote organic production. So our also one mandate is to follow organic cultivation. Then pre-breeding I have already discussed, and the mapping population also I discussed. So this is the traditional contact method what you use in millets and pseudo cereals. In this, we just take the two panicles because the flowering from upward downward. So we just clip it with the clip. Both male and flower will type the thread and just bag them. But this method will lead to a lot of self seeds and only 1 or 2 hybrid seeds. And for this, we have to grow the seeds harvested from female panicle in the next season. That will be a lot of area and labor as well for identifying true hybrids. So that is not an economically feasible method. And also the getting the hybrid seeds, the rate of getting hybrid seeds is very low. So at VPKS, what we did, we started the hot water emasculation. First is the right stage of panicle for female parent is the 1 day before anthesis for hot water emasculation. Then clipping the female panicle to remove self-fertilized fluid because the flowering starts from upward downwards. We just clip it. Then we study the hot water temperature, 48 degree. In our condition, 48 is ideal, where we will get maximum hybrid seeds. With the help of thermometer, then immerse the female panicle in hot water for 5 minutes, and then air dye the panicle, female panicle, and tie with the male panicle with a thread and just bag it. And we have a marker that in finger blood it is the node pigmentation is there. Pigmentation is there in panicle and also in nodes as well. That is dominant trait. We can use a marker in male parent. And for identify the true hybrid, we can see if the F1 has that trait, then means that the fertilization has been, the hybrid has been developed. In those cases where there is no pigmentation, we used to go to F2 generation and find out the hybrid type of based on panicle size, or the panicle type and other characters. So it's very quite effective method where hybrid rate has been increased, and most of our variety are now because of this performing very well, and we are getting very good segregants over the national tracks because of this methodology, because we can now implement a recombination breeding in our program. Now, as I said, the wide grain type of genotypes, we have developed the VL Madhwa. Sorry, Madhwa is a local term. It means finger millet. The VL finger millet 382. It's a white grain type. We might have seen a finger millet brown grain color. White grain. The white grain has a special feature because the tannin content is very low. Because of low tannin content, the biscuits and other things, the process for the value products, what you make from it, they have very good taste compared to the bitter taste of normal one. This is very good average yield of 20 kg per hectare. Sorry, it is quintal per hectare in organic condition, in medium maturity, high calcium. The fodder yield also 8 to ton per hectare. Then another one we have the VL finger millet 378. It is also released for infant organic ecology. This one, the VL finger millet 324, it is very quite popular dual genotype in our condition, and it has medium maturity. Average grain is 20 to 25 quintal per hectare, and also the fodder yield is very good. This is a ruling variety of Uttarakhand, also the state check, and still we get a lot of demand for this seed of this variety, and it's suitable for lower and mid hills. Similarly, the barn wheat I said is one of the major dual purpose crop which has voluminous fodder and grain as well. This is released for all barn and millet growing state. Average grain is 20 to 30 quintal per hectare, but in South India almost 40 quintal per hectare because they got more longer duration there. And average fodder yield is 100 to 120 quintal per hectare. Early maturity 100 to 105 days. Similarly, this is our latest release from the state, the VL Balaram 254, high grain yield, average fodder yield, and early maturity. Then we have Amaranth, the latest genotype, the VL Amaranth 110. It has very high calcium, high protein, high lysine, and yield advantage over the ruling variety is 29%. Then this one is our VL Amaranth 44. It is simply germplasm selection from the local selection from Pori region. Then the buckwheat variety we have, that is VL7, very popular in now. Last year we got a lot of demand from Meghalaya for this variety, and it's going on large, doing exceptionally well in that region. And it's only 65 to 70 days, even sometimes 65 to 60 days only. And have in our condition the grain yield is 12-15 quintal per hectare. Now, quickly I'll share some of the studies for their intensive millet promotion, like technology demonstration at large scale, then the post-forest validation along with a good fodder type, then enhanced leadership production, because that is one key factor for disseminating the technology to the farmers. Then developing seed by village and by clusters for enhanced production of millets. The promoting millets in north and eastern areas. Then promotion in Char Dham Yatra route, because this is one important event in every year at Uttarakhand, where if you can make some valuated product of this crop, then we can generate a lot of employment for the rural youth, and we can check the migration as well. Then ultimate awareness campaign among the communities. I will just share our case study. Last year, what we did, we gave a large scale demonstration of 30 hectares in Pauri Garhwal region of the Uttarakhand, and tried to involve women farmers in the farming of this crop. And this crop in that area, actually in Pauri Gurdwara, it used to be a very popular crop until 10 years back, but due to inaccessibility of good quality seed and heavy dependence on rice and wheat, they almost forgot this crop. So we used that area and started trying to revive that the area with the crop, and we got some good superiority over the farmers' practice. We started technology demonstration from beginning to end. We started promoting the line sowing with the line makers, then distribution of quality seeds to them, then front-end demonstration, and then inspecting the seed and training them in seed production, how to remove off-type plants and how to make the good quality seeds. So at least they can develop as a seed biochemist and seed villages. And then we promoted the millet thresher, because if you see in millets, the major problem is the post-harvest processing, and mainly women are involved in that, and the processing is very difficult. So we developed a thresher which has a threshing capacity of 40 to 60 kg for finger millet and 60 to 80 kg for banana millet, and very popular right now, and it's gone in a huge demand in North South India as well, and it's very low cost as well, and it can thresh the a finger millet of entire village in 2 or 3 hours, and it can run on the normal phase, single phase that comes in our homes. Then we gave them workshop on validation. We gave them training on developing some value products like namkeen, biscuits, and many other things, so that they can generate employment with that. So we target the self-help group of women in that region and provide them training with their making the different products like namkeen and other things. There are different products. We ask them to make Madhwa namkeen, fingerprint namkeen, as a compulsory dish during the marriage and naming ceremony, etc. in the village, because that is the one reason to promote this crop again, and to make it a compulsory dish during any auspicious function in the family or village. And then they are starting it now entrepreneurship with the brand name Organic Madhwa ki Namkeen, and because in the name of organic everything goes, and the state is organic, so they are also starting the entrepreneurship in that region as well. Then ultimately the seed production. This is the NFSM National Food Security Mission project, where they have a lot of emphasis on enhancing the indigenous production of millets. Through that, they want to enhance the nutrition security. And we at VPKS Horse Center and Uttarkashi and Bageshwar, we have 2 KVKs. We are producing a large quantity of seed for 40 to 50 quintal per year and distributing to the other states as well. Then that I said promotion Chardham route. This is one photo I am sharing from that region, because if you see the local boy, he's selling all that I said Baranaja, all traditional grain of Uttarakhand along with small plates. If you can make this type of promotion, commercialization, that it is one effective way to for attract tourists and others for purchasing the grain and generating the employment for the rural youth. This is one strategy. Then the millet production in north traditional areas like in Himachal, there are apple orchards. It's my wild idea. I don't know whether it will be successful or not. We can promote banana and millet as a fodder and grain crop in the orchards, and it can grow as well in that region. It's though we haven't tested, but I think it will grow. And here I am showing one picture from the work of Dr. Rana from Biodiversity International, and they revived and the buckwheat cultivation in Sangla Valley in Himachal Pradesh. Actually, Sangla Valley is very popular for apple cultivation, but before that, there were buckwheat was a major staple crop. They did a baseline survey and found that the elder people of that region still prefer the buckwheat products. So what they slowly started promoting buckwheat, and they make it compulsory in that region through Gram Panchayat and other things to at least have one dish in a day of buckwheat in their meal. So by that they can. So after few years, the entire valley has started growing the buckwheat, and the crop got lost glory. So same types of events or emphasis from policy support and other things are required in manna millets in northwest Himalaya and so as well. So this is all about my talks. And last, I will say that millets are of heritage grains. In fact, in Indian tradition, they are known from centuries, and in our mythology, they have been mentioned. If you see that India is a millet nation, the heritage grains. In fact, the Sudama, the Lord Krishna's childhood friend, used to eat it, and he used to say, there's a saying that. So with this, thank you very much for your patience listening.
Thank you, sir, for this valuable insight. Thanks a lot. If there are any questions from the participants, please ask. If there are any questions, please ask.
So we could not see the last slides. Please, can we have those slides, please?
Sorry?
The success story of that boy. like we could not see the last slide. Presentation was completed. You mentioned about the boy selling namkeens. Can we have that slide,
Okay, this
please, again, sir?
This one you was talking?
You were telling about a boy who was selling.
This slide you're talking
because
about?
it was breaking, we could not see the slide.
You're talking about this slide?
No, it was after those slides that showing the machines where you were talking about. You had distributed and made available to the female workers.
This one you're talking about?
After that, the slide is not coming up, sir.
It's not coming.
No, it's not coming up on the screen.
Is it not visible to you?
I think you, ma'am, do you have a good connection? I think you have a slow
Yeah,
network.
Okay.
yeah, no, I am not getting it. It's only the India, that nation I am seeing on the screen.
I don't know.
Sorry? Millet Thresher Comp.
No, it's the India, the millet nation.
That's my last slide.
Yeah, I just want to see the.
Ma'am, your connection is slow.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm stuck. I was listening to the.
One thing I can ask, I can ask sir to provide us the presentation.
Sure,
so
sure,
that
sure,
I
I
can
will.
share it
Okay,
with you.
thank you, sir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Any other question? Any question? Hello? If there are no questions, then we'll consider the session to be concluded. Thank you, sir. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Today. On behalf of the NADCL and IGFRI, and on behalf of participants, I would like to extend the thanks to you and for providing such insights into the topic and with a nice presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Convey my regards to Sohail.
Thank you, sir. I'll do. He'll be here. He'll be listening.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Participants, there is another session at 3 o'clock. Please join us at 3 o'clock. Till then, we can leave.